process, so.
Wow.
And that was
Yeah.
from cooking on an open fire, and that's one of
Yeah,
the
they're
serious
dangerous.
risks is the burn.
Sorry to
Kids
put
do
that
it
on
all.
you, brother.
Kids are always hurting.
Wow.
So everyone, should we start to get ready? We are one short of a quorum, so hopefully Marty will come in.
Yeah.
Yes, okay,
Got
sure.
close.
I have plenty of time.
There it is. We have a quorum.
Yay! We've been so happy to see you today.
No, we're always happy.
This is the part where I tell you I have to leave early. But not too early.
Okay, so shall we get started? We're just a couple minutes late, but I wanted to see if we could get a quorum before we started, so now we do. So we'll call the meeting to order, and we'll go over, review the agenda.
To that one I got here too.
We'll start out with public comments and then commissioners' comments. Review and approve, we have 3 months to approve since we've lacked a quorum in the last couple of meetings. And then Scott and I met with the city manager and assistant manager right after the new year to kind of talk about communications between the commission, and so we'll kind of update you on that plan. And then we'll get the director's report, and then we'll go over, Sergeant Williams has us to go over those policies again that we looked at last month. And so if anybody has any further comments on those, we'll do that. And then we'll end the meeting shortly after that with some closing comments. With that, if we don't have any changes or changes to the agenda, we'll start out with public comments, and I'll turn that over to Scott.
Thanks. And we have one member of the community providing some comments today, Kellyanne Stiles. You have 3 minutes, and we'll give you a heads up about 30 seconds prior, and then the alarm will go off. So.
Okay, thank you for your time. As most of you know, I'm a mother and grandmother of victims of sex trafficking, and I want to thank the police and everyone who has done their best to try to help my daughter. But due to the brutality of the people who control her, she hasn't fully cooperated, I get that. But this is National Sex Trafficking Awareness Month, and so I'm inviting anyone and everyone to attend Lane County Against Trafficking's Sex Trafficking Training Awareness on January 27th of this month, and I'm wearing blue in honor of that today. And I'm just inviting you to also attend the Speak Out, and I have the brochures if you're interested, and to also put out there that I'm still concerned for my daughter and grandson's safety due to his abusive father attempt with his family and friends to kidnap from Mexico at deadly harm. And I've been told that they were the ones that sent the sex traffickers after my family after they failed to do the worst when my family was living with me. So there's been a lot of good and bad happening, but I think many of you have tried to help. I want to encourage you to attend to help raise awareness.
Thank you.
Can you just pass those
So,
around?
yeah, if you just want to give those to us, and then we'll give them out to everybody, that would be great. Okay, thank you.
I don't believe we have any more.
Okay. All right,
wait.
thanks, Scott. So we'll move on to commissioners' comments, and we'll just go around the table, and we'll start with Marty, if he doesn't mind.
I just want to apologize for missing the last meeting. I was out of the country, and this is really worth doing, the sex trafficking awareness. We're required to do it annually for the military, and it really makes you think about what you're not seeing, you know, and makes you look for other things and think, oh, maybe I should say something to somebody, even if I'm not 100% sure. But maybe somebody does have those facts I don't have. So I'd encourage you to go. Thank you.
Edward?
The police commission did not meet in December. We were on holiday recess, as were many of our fellow police commissioners. Yes, sorry, the Human Rights Commission did not meet. So no report back from them. Just wishing everyone a happy new year.
Thank you. Chris?
If Marty's apologizing for missing one meeting, I guess I'll apologize for missing like 3. No, happy to be back and to have the time to be able to show up.
Thank you. Terry?
I just wanted to mention that I went to the State of the City address on whatever day that was.
A week ago?
And it was very enjoyable. It was, I loved the video presentation and didn't expect entertainment. So it was very different. First time I've been, so that would encourage me to do that again. So I enjoyed it.
It's a good speech.
So while we're all apologizing, I will also apologize for missing last time. I do not have such a good excuse though as being out of the country, but I'm glad to be here today.
Well, I was on vacation.
I have no remarks other than I think you kindly marked me present when I showed up at the very, 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 very end of a meeting once. Well, I'll take that. And I'll also apologize. I think I missed last month due to work and just extreme fatigue. So glad to be here tonight.
Well, for those of you I have not had a chance to meet, I am David, David Director, and once again, I'm really pleased to be here serving the city of Eugene, and it's a real learning opportunity for me to be here with the Police Commission and have a chance to learn about this. And in my role, I'll be passing on to our successful candidate for the job what this process is about and encourage them to fully embrace what is part of the culture of Eugene and part of who we are here. And that you hear I say we, is that when I'm here, this is my town, and this is my department. I've got me in the University of Oregon hat that I wear. It's just I felt like one today. So, at any rate, I told Bill a little earlier that one of the things I may do during the course of the meeting, I'm an observer, and that's part of I observe and I listen. That's what I do in order to take in as much information I can. And one of the things that is interesting to me is how councils work, how commissions work, and how they relate and their business. So if I push back from the table, I'm not disengaging, I'll be here, but I just want to see how things work. I want to stand back, see your actions. So when our new chief comes in, and I'll be part of that selection process, is that I will be able to communicate to them who you are, what you are, how you function, and give them a real positive spin to what our purposes are here. Is that okay with everybody? So, thank you.
Thanks. As in our conversations that we've been having, Carter, and preparing for the next year or so, one of the things that I'd like to do is kind of resurrect that community outreach piece that we talked about a few months ago, settled. And I think that if we can get some social media and some other pieces there, that we could be more of a resource to the city council, kind of providing that advice and other pieces as we get more information from the community, from the members about different issues that come up. I think that would be good. Also the city manager. So as we clear up those lines of communication, and I just think we could be more of a resource to both the city council and the city manager. So I'll get something out for the next meeting before, so you can study ahead. And if things come to mind and how we do that, what would be the best avenues, I'd be happy to take down some notes and bring those with Carter and Bill. Thanks.
I just want to say thanks. It's nice to have a quorum. I thank everybody for coming tonight. And I also think that some of the policies that we're going to talk about tonight are really important policies. So it's nice to have the whole commission here to be able to talk about them and then also give Sergeant Williams some good recommendations on where to go from there. So thank you. So with that, we'll move to the review and approve of the minutes. Does anybody, we'll start with September. And what we'll do is if anybody has any changes or any comments on them, we'll just go through each one, and then at the end we can make a motion to accept them all as they were changed. So anybody have any comments on September's meeting? A long time ago. Hopefully those that attended can remember it. And we did have a quorum in November, so we do have October's were approved, but so we go to November's. Does anybody have any comments about November's? Okay. December's meeting? And if there's no comments, I will look for a motion.
I guess I'll move to approve the September, November, and December minutes of the Police Commission.
Seconded.
Second by Edward.
Bless you.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. So with that, we'll move into the next topic, which is a report on our meeting with the city manager. So one of our work plan items was to try to better formalize our communication process between the city manager's office. Because in our bylaws and in the ordinance that created this commission, it talks about that we are to make recommendations to the police department, to the city manager, and the city council. And so in our work plan that we put together at a retreat, that was one of the items that we wanted to do, is try to clarify the communications, how we better communicate with those other, because the police department's always sitting at our table, but the city manager is not here. And sometimes we also want to make sure, part of this discussion, talk a little bit about, is there better ways we can communicate with the council too, which will lean towards you two, Claire and Jennifer, to kind of help us talk about that tonight a little bit, if there's better things we could do. So we met with John and with Christy and talk about this. And so because what we found is that there was no direct line for them to find. So if we have things that we wanted to make recommendations on, or that we sort of had a lot of concerns about process or policy. And a couple of examples that I used with them was one on the car camping that is really sort of controlled by the city's planning department. They put together a contract with a third party to help monitor, and then through that procedure, it goes back to the police department. We had a few meetings on that. And so to talk about how we could maybe have influence on how that contract is going, because we did get a lot of public comment about, some concerns about how the process worked within the community. So what we came up with, and Scott, please jump in as we talk through this. So what John would like to see is he'd like to see a regularly scheduled meeting between the chair people of the commission, whether that's monthly or quarterly. It sort of depends on if we have topics we feel like need to be brought to their attention. And so that's where I think the commission, as we go through some of these topics, that those would be good to have motions that say we'd like to have this brought up to the city manager, or this talked about, and so that can make sure that those get to those meetings and those topics are discussed about. So it sounded like that was an agreeable solution between the two the groups, and I think it'll give us a better avenue, because I don't think that's ever happened in the process of this commission, that they've had that direct communication. And I don't know if, as remembered when we sort of brought this up a little bit a couple meetings ago, the chief said that wasn't his job, and I think that was sort of the assumption, that the chief was relaying that to the city manager's office, and he didn't feel that was his job. His job was just to take the communication back to the department. So with that, I think that was a good outcome. Anything else from the meeting you want to?
I'd just say that was very similar to the other commissions that are meeting more regularly with the city manager, and our commission hasn't done that, so this will be in alignment with the other commissions as well, and committees.
So the next piece I want to talk about a little bit is does everybody feel, or especially the two council persons that we have here, is there a better way that the commission could communicate with the council on things that we talk about here that may be of interest, or we feel like should be brought to the council's attention? I can't think of any real examples offhand, other than because you two sit on the commission, so I don't know if it's easier if we went to a council meeting regularly, or to a work session and just sort of talked about topics once in a while that the whole council could hear.
Well, a couple of thoughts. So in terms of coming before the council, I think it'd probably be challenging to get you on the agenda more than the once a year that you get now. Because then we might have our 6 boards and commissions wanting to come multiple times a year. Okay. That's just not practical. So another couple of other options would be, one, to ask us specifically to carry a message forward, and hopefully we would be amenable to that, or to provide an update in, a memo that gets distributed to the council. And like you, Bill, I can't think of a specific issue that might rise to the level of needing that, but there may be a particular policy that we're discussing that we know is potentially a hot topic for the community, and you might want to let the council know that this is going to come before the commission and we're giving it input. And individual counselors might have constituents who have, brought the issue to them separately and have some feedback for you, or, so I think that could be beneficial. I think it's great that the city manager is open to having some regular check-ins with our chair and vice chair. I think that's very positive. And that can be another way to carry things forward to the council, but I think the more direct way would be either to request your council representatives to do it, or to craft a memo on behalf of the commission and send that to the city council, either via email or hard copy.
Yeah, I agree with Claire. I think it might, even in working in conjunction, like, this is what you'd like us to talk about, and then it's followed up with more detail in a memo of some kind. Because, can't guarantee if you just send something in an email it's going to get read, but if it's already been brought to their attention, they see that email, I think they're more likely to open it and see, okay, what additional information can I get? So,
and then that also gives individual counselors a clear way to communicate back with you if that's what they wish to do.
I guess my suggestion would be just to consolidate the two processes, and when you meet, I would say quarterly probably with the city manager, just so it's not happening all the time, and more if you need it, but that seems to be a reasonable check-in. And then you just, as you say, memorialize it in a memo and send it up if the council wants to do a work session on something in particular. But I think the memo should also solicit concerns. There have been some things of I guess, public concern without commenting on a particular case. There was an issue of sexual harassment, which, setting aside the particulars of that one, I would be curious to know if, for instance, female police officers how they feel about the environment. Is this a one-time deal, or is this something where they feel put out? We do what we call climate surveys in the military, and it's not just point fingers at anybody in particular to say, how do you feel about the environment that you're working in? Like I said, there's the CRB, and there's a whole process of dealing with particulars, but then, the back end sometimes doesn't happen despite, who's our CRB liaison again? Steve's best efforts. Just to close the loop, I realize we're not supposed to discuss specific cases, and we absolutely shouldn't, but the policy implications or possible policy implications of specific cases are something that it is our purview to do. And so, like in this case, I think if I were a city councilor, which is looking less and less likely, I would, I'd want to know, okay, I read something in the paper. I know nothing about it. Is it something I should be concerned about? Not on the particulars of the case, but hey, there's policy oversight for the police. Is there some data we can gather that tell us whether we need to do anything? So anyway, that's just kind of how I would see it happening.
Edward?
So on the Human Rights Commission, the chair and vice chair of the HRC meet quarterly with the city manager and with the mayor. We just had our first one a couple months ago. Our next one is next month that I've done, and we found them to be really helpful. So I'm glad that we're talking about doing that here as well. I think that it's a good way for us as a group to be able to relay information, and it's interesting from the HRC standpoint. Our job is almost easier because we advise the city council and the city manager, and we don't have a specific department that we're advising. For us as the police commission, really, by and large, what we do is advise the police on their policies, and that's very self-contained. And city council doesn't often weigh in on specific police policies, in part because of charter restrictions that limit their ability to do that. But I think there are some macro level policing type issues that we will have opportunities to weigh in on, things like budget, where we got that great presentation last month on the city budget and the unmet needs assessment. And if there are things like that we as a commission think are important to support the work of the police, maybe that's a good place where we can weigh in. And what we've found is that when we send, oftentimes what we'll do is we'll vote to have the chair or the vice chair write a letter to council, and then we'll also ask our city councilors to put the issue in the hopper for potential agenda items or to make an announcement when they do their announcements, because you guys all report back on the committees and things that meetings you attend on behalf of the city. And we've found that to be a really, really successful way to make progress on our agenda. And we've been really pleased that the council has listened to us and acted oftentimes and sometimes very rapidly on the input we've gotten. So I'm glad you guys are asking these questions, and I think that that's a good track to take.
Go ahead.
I think also, kind of like the Human Rights Commission, that as you exercise this option, it'll become more and more clear where its value lies and what are the things to bring there that really gain some traction and help. And then I just think the baseline thing of just having that dialogue, is very positive.
One thing though that I forgot to mention that came out of our meeting too, that I sort of will pose to you two is that John said that he would also actually try to maybe use the commission more to kind of run things through us that they're thinking of, and so I sort of opened that up to the council, that if there's things that are coming up at work sessions that maybe you want to have the commission look at and get some public comment on, and then discuss how that affects that may affect the policing of the city. That I think that's a good avenue to start to look at. Maybe use the commission as more of a front buffer to find out, what is the temperature on a certain topic or a certain issue to do that. So
Yeah.
John thought of several, and one is the kind of the community criminal justice. I'm trying to think what the report that's coming out.
Community justice.
Community justice is to have that come through the commission, and then so that they can sort of weigh in on all those pieces, and as that goes through the process, we sort of have an opinion on how that works. So
I think that's great.
good. Anything else? Anybody want to comments? I think this is a great direction for us, for Scott and I to sort of work out and formalize this going forward, so that we can keep it up. Good. Thank you. With that, we will move to the director's report.
Thank you.
David.
Well, I thought what I would do with you tonight is tell you and just kind of update you perhaps on our search for the police chief. And I had a discussion this afternoon with Bill about something that we came into my hands today that we're working on here, that just kind of give you a draft of some of the things we're working on in terms of data. With the, just so you'll know, the Strategic Government Resources, the CEO of that organization, Ron Hollowfield, I've known him for many years, and we've worked on we worked in tandem with one another on several other places where I was interim police chief. I was not working for Strategic Government Resources at the time, but was involved in those processes that the city managers wanted me to be involved in, so I'm very familiar with the process, and it is a good and vigorous process. And people that apply for the job must be serious about it. It is one that is challenging, and it is one that will vet your candidates well. The gentleman who's actually running the search, Larry Boyd, he was a student of mine many years ago, and when I was teaching statistics in the Institute, and later on he would become the chief of a neighboring community where I was chief. And so we've known each other quite a long time. He's an excellent, very bright man of character, and he is really committed to doing the best job to get you a police chief. We've talked, we've made our deal that we're going to do the very best. We're not close friends, but we're very close professional colleagues, and I respect him. So I think you've got good people doing the work for you. The process is running as it should, as the plan was put together by the manager's office on the timeline. They opened Larry Boyd's work, all the community meetings and meeting with the staff, led to a brochure that was put out in November, put out on a national scale. SGR has one of the most robust systems for contacting people who would be eligible for this position throughout the nation. And so that went out. It opened up in November. The position opening closed today at 5 o'clock. And so tomorrow, Larry will start going through those applications for the first examination of whether the individuals who applied meet the qualifications. He will meet with, he's coming, and maybe Ron is coming too at the same time, in late January to meet with the city manager and his team to review that first set, and that's where there will be kind of the first time to kind of vet who we want to keep in that process. Along the way, there'll be 2 more times that will happen before we get down to March. In between, the people who are involved in this process will have undergone thorough backgrounds. They will search that if their name appeared anywhere, it will come up. It's very thorough. They will have done live interviews that will be recorded. They will have answered a series, not just a series, we're talking about 20, 25 questions. That this is where you really get to find out if people understand the philosophies, the needs that are for the type of leadership that's involved with this type of position. They will, and again, it's very rigorous, and then we hope to have finalists. I think they're looking to try to get the finalists ready for coming in for the final interviews. I believe in late February, early March. That's kind of the timeline. But I think they're shooting for being able to possibly, make a selection in March, something like that. That's the kind of the general timeline. All those things are very flexible depending on what happens in the process. I have a lot of confidence in these people. And I am working, actually, my contract was FCR to work for the manager in this capacity. And I will be in those final interviews and probably be looking at the finalists myself too. I've told the people here, I'll be the fly on the wall for the citizens of the city and for this department to hear what's being said, to see if they're the right fit for what was described in the brochure. Of course, Larry Boyd will be too. These people are very committed. I've always been very impressed with the process. If you have any questions about that?
Is it possible to see that brochure that was?
Oh, yeah, it's on your website.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it might be taken down.
Oh, no. Well, if it is taken down, it wasn't the last time I looked.
Okay.
I was actually asking people in the department if they had seen it, as I've been meeting everybody, and a lot of people indicated they hadn't. I've been directing the website, but I went ahead and just sent it to everybody in the department the other day. And it's nice. It tells about our city. It tells about who we are, what our goals are, and what we expect out of the new.
I'll send out tomorrow.
Okay.
Thanks.
It's easy. Well, I did ask Bill this afternoon. We have a project we're working on that has to do with the data that we capture, and it only came to me today, and I asked if it would be okay if I just kind of gave you a view of how we're going to start looking at information. Some of the materials that I saw that were being presented when I first got here were rather complicated. I'm a data person. I look at data all the time, just like a financial person will look at a spreadsheet and notice something just like that. I can look at data. I was involved in data processing for the Dallas Police Department and crime analysis for them, and that's when I started my journey down that road back in the 80s. But when we're presenting this information for people to make decisions, or for us to make decisions, sometimes we need to bring it down to its simplest aspects, to the bones, and to look at it. And so that's what we're working on. So we've been working with our crime analysis unit in cooperation with other people in the department. We're going to take this out further within the department to get more input in for direct use of this data for making more accurate deployment decisions on that we do data-led policing. We're really trying to make this vibrant so that people can see these things right up front. And so we've been working on this over the last few weeks. About the last 3 weeks, we really got into it as I've finally cleared the time to look at what we have. And together the team came up with data that is looking at what we started collecting in the SunGuard system in 2014. The CAD RMS system we have now went live in November 2013. Really started feeling confident about the data collection in January 2014. And so we're not going back beyond that. And so by the next year, we'll have a 5-year range, and that's good, strong data for setting trends and stuff, and we'll build that up. So if you bear with me, I'll real quickly just run through some examples. These are drafts. I'm fairly confident in the nature of the numbers that are in here, but we are double checking everything. So this is really rough draft information. The things we'll look at is population, sworn officers per capita, staffing, demand, service demand, officer activity, crime calls, on time. This is a, that's not exactly accurate on the label, but it is close enough. The slides, I understand I've got the tool right here. So let's see. And again, because it's hard to see up there, but this is much simpler than what we had in the past. And every slide, when you look at it, you're going to see it's from 2014 to 2017, and off on your far right hand, you'll see the percentage change from the first data point to the fourth data point. So it'll be consistent, so when you look at it, you'll always be able to quickly assess it. These are your population estimates. These come from the American Community Survey. We found this, that works for the U.S. Census Bureau. We found this to be the most accurate, and we want to always have the same baseline when we do per capita, so this is what we use. So what you see there is we've got a 16% increase in population.
Six.
No, I meant 6, excuse me. And I'm going to get, I thought that was
It
high.
feels like 6.
Yeah. It was that line there, so it's the glare of the lights on there. I'd like to take that off. So, and this is our authorized foreign, the FTEs, that is your positions. That's that is a full-time employee per 1,000 population. And so again, same population figure. If you look for the sworn police officers here, you see how it goes down. And there's a reason for that. And the reason is that the sworn staffing has remained static at 192 and 193 FTEs during this past 4 years. And so there's a story that's told there, and that is that the ability to meet service demand may be, I'm not saying it is, but there's an indication that would make it more challenging to make service demand. So let's look further. Now this is calls for service are designated in 2 different ways. Those that come through dispatcher that the public initiates. John Cusis and Jane Cusis and picks up the phone, calls the police, and comes in there, and those are the calls that are being captured here. So if you look from 14 to 17, we've had a 21% increase. Now looking at 16 and 17, they're exactly the same. That would be weird, but that's an average daily for the year. So that's how many calls come in a day. That's a fairly significant increase in 2014. And so realizing there's spikes on that too. That's just an average on the daily average. Jeff?
Did you have a chance to break this out by season or month to see how
Not
big the
yet.
spikes are per day?
We will be doing a lot more. This is the big picture. First, what we're trying to do is develop a scheme and a strategy for how we break the data out. And once we have that strategy developed, we will go back in and we'll just kind of dig deeper into the data. But we first want to get this is what we want to do. We want to be able to paint pictures that give us knowledge and then will direct us. Now, the information I'm giving you here today will not direct us to anything in a crime pattern, but it will direct us in terms of thinking about the things we do that will affect the budget for the city. And so, but again, this is all rough draft information, and I hope it's helpful, and that's why I'd like to get that feedback from you. Now, this is the daily average officer initiated. Officer initiated means that officers driving down the street, they see something, and they initiate the case number. They call. They call and say, I saw this. Look at 2014, look at 2017. It's dropped 26%. Now you say, well, that's not a lot. You're only talking about 30, a little over 30 incidents a day on average. But that is indicative of a bigger demand on their time than they have to actually initiate, that they used to initiate calls. I would love to be able to get this data back farther, but we just simply don't have that data in a retrievable format at this time. Now this is persons crimes. So think of persons crimes. I'm very clear about when I put up anything for public presentation that we footnote so that somebody wants to get in the details. Person crimes include homicide, rape, robbery, assault, sex offenses, family offenses, and kidnapping. And so over this 4-year period, we've seen you had 12 on a per 1,000 people. Now it's up to 14. What that indicates is it's really just shows you that we've had more persons crimes. Some people want to call us violent crime. I would call all those things violent. And it's just an indication that we've seen a creep in that. This is property crimes. Now, the property crimes are defined as burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, arson, forgery, embezzlement, stolen property, vandalism, and extortion. And so property crimes have dropped. Now, that's unusual. But we have a theory about that, and but I can't absolutely say this is the truth. But what we believe, based upon, and I do upon my experience, is usually that's an indication that people aren't calling the police as much. If you got, and we have experienced, I look usually at what's going on nationally, and I have not tried that at this point in time. I'm just working on what we have. But that's indicative of when you get that kind of drop, although you say, well, it's not that much. It's only about, 4 or 5 a day, or 4 or 5 in terms of population. But you got to think about our population. And so, at any rate, so it's something to consider in terms of impact upon services. Are people calling? And we want them to call. That's important, and so this goes to a trust factor that when we can't get to things. Society crimes per 1,000. These are the offenses that the kind of things we think about in terms of downtown, but they occur all over the city. But there's been a concentration over the last 2 years as we've looked at the issues with downtown, and you'll see in a moment that the progress we've made on that. And actually, this is it here. You see how it drops? What happened in 2016? Well, in 2016-17, we instituted all the downtown activities. And because that was a concentration, and if you remember looking at the spatial distribution maps, that we will still do that to kind of get the visual sense of where things are at. And you always saw the group in the same place. Well, that's where the group was. And it stayed that way. So what we're seeing here is we're just seeing, we believe that being able to institute a concentration in an area can make an impact, but what happens to the rest of the city? So we will be looking, when we start dividing things out, we'll start looking geographically at those pictures too. This is the average, this is about dispatching calls. And so queue time is hold time. Call comes in, dispatch receives it, and then when do they dispatch it? Give it to a unit to say, you need to go to this location. That is significant. Going from 18 minutes to 36 minutes average daily. Why? Well, we're getting a volume of calls, there's a lot of society calls, and even the property calls, and we're not getting to them. Stop calling, but that's what we think. But there's an indication here. There's another slide that's coming up will give us another indication about some of the work we're doing, which is both positive in terms of our service, but maybe negative in terms of our ability to provide that same quality service in the future. So that's queue time, because that's not when you get there. That's when you get the officers in the car says, 10-4, I'm going. I don't know if we say that or not. That's what you hear in the movies. So this is that average response time. Now, here we see an average response time in 2014 of 4 minutes, and it's grown to 5.7, which is a 33% increase. What happens is, once you're having an increased calls of service where you're having to run from call to call under days, nights particularly, this happens. If you think of a geographical area that is our city, and this is an interesting city to traverse. I have driven around it as much as I can to get a feel for the city, and this is a difficult place to get around. Unless you're on West 11th going out that way, it's not very open, and so it's just the way it is. And so, given that and the fact that now instead of being able to go to a call, you can have your designated beats and people kind of work in that area. And then when they're responding, their travel is not as far, so their time goes down. But when you're over by Springfield, over in the southeast part of town, and you get a call up off of 99, up off of Barger Road, it's going to take you a while to get there. And so that travel time increases based upon the distance they have to travel and the time of day. And so that concerns, but overall that means we're not getting the calls as fast as we used to. And that means our citizens not getting a real fast response, but there's other things there. What's our average daily service time on call? Our time on call is going up. The calls we're getting on, we are spending more time. Now, the things that we do to increase quality of service and to slow things down when we have society crimes in particular, where we're dealing with people who maybe have challenges mentally, they are sick, they are in some way acting out, and we're slowing these things down when you're handling distraught people. That's more time on call. And that's what we're theorizing at this point. I can't tell you that for a fact, but that time on call has been creeping up. So we get more calls, it's taking longer to get there. People having to wait before the call even gets dispatched significantly, and it takes longer to get there. And then when we're there, we're spending more time. Now, spending more time is a good thing, but while we're spending more time on those calls, other calls are backing up. So this is something that I came across when I was interviewing the data people, and it was kind of an anecdotal comment that was made to me that caught my ear about calls we can get to. And I asked that we look a little deeper into this, and we are aware of it. It is something that we're not happy about, but it may be just indicative of a system that has been pressed to beyond its limits. And that's what I'm concerned about. These are calls that never really get dispatched. Nobody go. And what happens is they just kind of fall aside. 4 hours, 5 hours later, you got a trespass call. The nature of these is that these are calls that are disregarded by a supervisor, either in dispatch or in the field, because there's nobody to go, and they are lower level. There may be things, they could even be things like somebody's driving up Highway 5 and they see a speeder, a dangerous driver, and they call it in. Well, if you're not right there, they're going to be out of Eugene in a minute anyway, and so there's nobody to really send. So it does include those kind of calls too. But it also has what we can't get out to people. We just can't get to the call. We know there might be somebody to look for, maybe somebody was a suspicious person, maybe somebody that was trespassing, and they do leave. Many times people will sit around, they'll trespass, and then, well, by the time we get there, they're gone. So a lot of times we know that's the case with people that are transient, they're passing through. What they'll say is, be on the lookout for them. Be on the lookout for a car. We saw a car do this, we saw a car do that, or we saw a person do this, and it will never really be dispatched to call, it's just put out to our offices. And they hear this is termed an information call. Now, the reason I went ahead and showed you, this is the last slide, and we'll just close that. I'll tell you about that. The reason I want to show you this is that we want to break down the data that we have into the simplest way to look at it and tell us a story about what the difference between our service demand and our ability to meet that demand. And over a period of time of looking at these, just like the other information got, but it's not as voluminous, where you have 60 data points of information with every month for every year. That's okay, and if you're the data guy, you can look at that and you can see things, but if you want, it just kind of breaks it down to its simplest elements so we can look at it and helps us make quicker decisions and start. This makes you think. Why? Data didn't tell you anything. Data points directions. This is where we get the why, and sometimes it's here. And so that's why we're doing this. Looking at this right here is the positive thing about this is it's a way to tell a story, is that we're concerned about that. There's nobody that when I start talking about this, I got a little excited. I said, well, you mean we're not going to our citizens? And the response is, we don't know what, we can't get to them. And they're telling me that's not the way we want it. We don't know what else to do. So we're going to take this further. I really think we've got the team going in a direction to look at this. Our next step is to expand upon this. If you went at my office, you'd see snapshot boxes all across my whiteboard. I'm a visual person. When I brought the team in, I said, I want you to look at what we can do with the data. And once we got them thinking in those terms, they just jumped up and they got it done very quickly. And like I said, it came to my hands today. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to show this to you, because I think that's what you're about. If you want to know what we're doing, you're our commission. If we'll be able to give you something that's a little brighter, a little easier to digest, if you will. And we'll take this and we will dig into the details. The details will come after we figure out the big picture issues. And then we're going to get in with our patrol commanders. They're excited about the possibilities, and we're going to start looking at building new tools. And we have another system called Crime View that is a good tool. We're going to take these things, combine it with that to give us better, more accurate deployment time. By you start adding a real crime analysis takes your geography, it takes your time of day, your day of week, your time of day. It does look things like seasonal that was brought up, and we'll look at anything that has to do with method of operation and suspect information where we see commonalities, and there's different ways you do those searches to extract that information from our CAD RMS system. Those are very complicated searches. It takes a while to learn how to do that. And then we can use this data in the long run to do our own studies about about our staffing needs. A lot of people talk about, at my time, a lot of people talk about a study that was done in 2007. The man that did that study, I have worked with, I know him, I've known him for many years. It's just pure happenstance that he did that study. I actually was a subcontractor for him in El Paso several years ago on a project. And I called him to see if he still had the raw data. They don't keep that data that long, because I wanted to get some real clear pictures from that 10 years ago. And I said, what's the relevancy of this study today? And he laughed. Something that's 10 years old no longer has a relevancy. It doesn't have a context. We need to build new context. So you will have the accurate information for you to make the decisions about what our activities are. I appreciate you giving me the time in my report to do this report this evening.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions or comments? Chris?
I just want to say, this is one of the most exciting things I've sat at this table and reviewed with you guys, because this is a huge issue. The points that Director James makes has to do with our capabilities of taking care of the citizens of this city. It also has a huge amount of impact on our morale at the department, and the workload and the stress that we have to deal with, and the lack of vacation that we get, always being at minimum staffing levels, things like that. Patrol is the backbone of any department. That's, essentially, doesn't matter if a department's gigantic or tiny, it all starts with patrol. There's plenty of small departments where patrol does everything. Well, we're fortunate here to have other units, but patrol affects the entire workforce of our department. And this, I'll tell you guys a little bit of information. I'll try to be short, but this trickles up to every unit, and I'll just speak for myself. I work in violent crimes. I have, as of today, 43 open cases. I will never get to many of those. I've contacted, just in the past couple months, a woman, her 12-year-old son disclosed that he was sexually abused in a bathroom at a bowling alley. I called her when I was able to finally reach back around, and the way we usually operate is we make contact initially, say, hey, I've got a lot of cases that are on fire, and I will call you back. It might not be today or tomorrow, but I will call you back and we will get to this. Just like any patrol call that says, sorry, we can't get to you right now, but we're gonna be there in 16 minutes, 25 minutes, or whatever it might be. Call her back and she says, you know what? I brought this back up to my son. You know, he got really upset, so he doesn't really remember what happened anymore. Really upset hearing the names of his two caretakers, who were the two that likely did this, and we're not going to move forward. So there's plenty of other stories. I won't get into it, but this trickles up to every unit, and it affects some of the most heinous crimes in the city. And it's really unfortunate that it's taken this long, in my opinion. I've only been at UPD for 6 years, but to have this addressed, to my knowledge, this has been an issue for 2 decades. And I hope that we get a chief that has the ability to be transparent about that to you guys, this board, and to city council, and to the city manager's office, to say, these are the things that we do great, but this is the stuff where we need help in. And you guys are the people that need to know that. So I'm glad that you guys are learning this.
If I may, I want to let you know, Chris, that as we go through this, we have another system we're looking into that's going to look deeply into the overtime issues we have, and we will be able to use this system to dig into the case for the investigators, the case analysis in terms of trying to time y'all have put in. And so we will, this thing has the potential to grow into a much more vibrant tool for everybody in the organization to make assessments of their operations and kind of see where they're at. So that will not be first, because this is the backbone, like you said. Thank you.
And I would just say, I mean, I appreciate, I'm sort of a simple person, and sometimes when those maps get to be very complicated, you know, as not being a police officer or somebody in there, those were difficult for decipher. This, I can sort of get through and understand, you know, that to ask questions and at least do that. I think this is much more helpful for at least me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Claire?
Yeah, I would definitely concur with what Bill just said. You know, the heat maps and neighborhood maps that we saw were interesting at a certain level, but they didn't necessarily reveal a lot of concrete information that we might take action on. And I think this kind of presentation, even though at this right now very high level, points to trends that, you know, we might not know exactly why those trends are in that direction, but we can see what they are, and then we can start to dig deeper, and that feels a lot more concrete for me in terms of policymaker and budget committee
That's good
member.
feedback for us.
And then the endorsement from Chris was the most important part of this conversation as far as I'm concerned. So thanks for sharing that. I'm glad to hear that that's your response to this. I hope to see more of this going
I
forward.
hope to provide it for you. We got a good team here, and we're going to get them excited, and we're going to hand this off, and we're going to intelligently inform our new chief about some things right up front. We'll do the digging and that hard work now. Thank you. Marty?
I suppose it's because I'm a military reservist, but one of my long-term interests is the reserve officer program. It would be, I think it'd be useful to pass on kind of a snapshot of where that is, because we can't always fund more full-time officer positions, but if we have some flex in the budget from time to time, you know, reserve officers are one way to get more staffing without a wholesale commitment to more funding. So it's, you know, it's a gap filler, but you know, it is something good to look at.
I have pretty strong views about those programs. The policy has been worked on. The reserve policy, didn't you say there was some work on that? But right now, it's basically dormant.
Oh, well, I really should look at it.
I know what, I've got so much stuff in my mind that I've looked at. I did see a reserve, an old reserve policy, and he feeds me stuff before we bring it to y'all. But I have some real strong views, both positive and negative, about that you have to do to run those things appropriately. And if y'all want to do that, I'll talk about it.
We don't need to talk about it now, but
Yeah. Oh, no,
I mean, if it's dormant, we should probably take a look at it and see. And I'm, you know, my model might be different from yours, and it's different for police than it is for military. So, but if it is something we could look at, then, you know, and you tell us what makes sense.
Blaine County's got a good program, and it works different places.
Edward?
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, I think that as we were talking at the beginning of this meeting about how we're communicating with the city council, the mayor, and the city manager, and then we get this presentation here, which, you know, lays out in as plain English as you can get some of the challenges we've been hearing about more broadly over the course of the past several months that I've served on the commission, at least. You know, I think it really falls back on us to figure out how we incorporate influencing policy decision-making and budget decision-making processes to resolve some of these issues. Because I think, you know, from speaking, wearing my Human Rights Commission hat, if we have children who are victims of sexually based crimes in our community who we can't get to because we've made budgetary decisions that constrain our ability to do that, that's not supporting the values that our community has, and I don't think that it's something that we should be, as the police commission who's supposed to advise on police policy, you know, we can sit by. The policies we're reviewing are important policies, but we have to balance some of those other bigger aspirational things. None of us are experts on police staffing, but we have people who are experts on police staffing who can help us understand that. And so I hope that over the course of the next year or so, we can find ways to incorporate some of those questions into the work that we've got. And I think it fits in our work plan as we adopted it before, but I hope we look at ways to do that.
Anyone else? Terry?
I was just going to add that this presentation of this data in this manner does make clear and reflects the concerns that Officer Green relayed to me when I did my ride-along with him. The things that he could no longer, he didn't have time to do. He went from call to call to call. He didn't have time to cruise the neighborhood that he knows, that, you know, to watch for things. He just didn't have time to investigate on his own. And he found that incredibly frustrating. He didn't stop to eat. If I hadn't had to go to the bathroom, I don't think he'd have stopped for that either. So, but, you know, it's just nonstop. And he was very, and as Chris said here, morale that's one of the biggest things that impacts officers every day, is not being able to do their job. So, and this makes it clear.
Yeah.
Good. Anyone else? Scott?
I just think as we think about the 21st century policing and community-based policing, when you can't talk to the community, you really can't do those things. And when you're using de-escalation as a method to bring people down in a way, in a safe manner, it makes it very hard to do that and then address the other needs in the city too. So somebody's suffering because we're trying to implement a policy that we're not staffed potentially to have. And that's, I don't know, that's a really tough challenge, and it doesn't sit well with me. And I know that I live in a neighborhood where it was, I think there were about 20 vehicles with rocks thrown through them, and there was a neighbor that was driving around begging folks to turn in the police reports online because they couldn't get an officer out there. And I thought that was a really, to me, it just struck me. I was standing out there talking to one of our friends, and I thought, wow. And I said, no, make sure you file your police reports, everybody. But the fact that there were people who were not willing to do that or just didn't think anything would happen from that, really from a service level to the community, I thought that was upsetting, even though I knew why, because there was bigger things going on. But so I'm glad that you've outlined that in the data.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. So we will ask Sergeant Williams to join us to talk about his policies. See his prop that he brought for us today.
Did you bring one for everyone?
Only, right?
Oh, fun.
So,
Boys.
apologies for all my hacking in the back. At day 8 of this sinus thing, and I haven't had a cough until we get to the quiet part of the meeting. So, thank you for the lozenge. And I'm a little foggy, so
Should we send you
I'll
home?
ask for a little bit of patience through this.
Chief, can he be excused?
Well, I didn't leave in my office for the last 3 days, so.
I know I don't get an opinion on weighing in on some of these things, but you said that Detective Mackey's response to that was one of the biggest takeaways here. And if I could exclamate it and underline it and bold it and back up everything that he said, 100%. And then I was thinking of Officer Green when Terry commented on him because he came to me this summer frustrated about having project houses that had neighbors calling him because they were frustrated about the activity that was going on, and he simply didn't have time to try to address it and help it. And he's a very, very aggressive, proactive, hardworking, and was very frustrated by his inability to do that. And it's frustrating for me to see that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we're taking a fresh look at the topic and trying to figure out a different way of looking at it to try to make some traction on it, because I don't think people truly totally understand. I think I overheard my brother today saying that his caseload is somewhere in the 60 range. He works in the same office.
On the low end.
Somewhere in the vicinity of 60 based on his desk right now.
Your actual brother?
Yeah, he's a violent crimes detective here also. Yeah. So I've got three requests for the police commission tonight. I'm hoping to get a thumbs up on the armed barricaded policy if we can get to that point. A thumbs up on the de-escalation policy as well. And then I'd like to just tease out to the commission that because of the political and all the concerns that go along with the unmanned aerial systems, to consider the board to take on the idea of a public forum to try to draw in more so that we can be doing everything we can to go through this process properly. And so I'll leave that up to Bill to direct and kind of talk about that. But that's something that I'm hoping that the board is willing to take up to help us do everything we can to hit the right steps here. In the meantime, a lot of the concern, I think, comes from the unknown. And so I brought in this is a DJI Mavic Pro. All it is a little flying machine with a camera on the front. And you can pass it around and take a look at it. It's fairly durable. This one is pretty unique in that the arms fold into the body, so it fits into a package about that big. And this isn't far off from the possibility of a piece of machinery that we could have here. That this would do a good chunk of what we would need or what we would be using, or something very, very similar to that. The portability on this one is really cool because it's so small. I'm gonna break it. But kind of interesting to see. So I thought that you all might be interested. Yeah, right. That is really nice. Might be interested in taking a look at that while we get started here. So I'd like to start us off with the.
Do you have the? How do you turn it on?
Don't shoot me.
I was told that if we have time afterwards, we can have a little demo.
Sweet. We will make sure there is time.
So hurry.
Right. So do we have a vote on the armed barricade?
Let's get done.
So we went through all three of these at the last meeting that didn't have a quorum, and so since there were quite a few people missing, I'm going to kind of try to start from the top with the explanations of where we started, how we got to the point where we're at with this. The armed barricaded subjects policy is one that's been swirling with a lot of interest and some controversy, and it's just a very difficult topic. And so this summer, we held an Armed Barricaded Subjects Summit where we invited community partners from a number of different organizations, leaders from a number of different organizations, including Wayne County Behavioral Health. Help me out here.
LCB.
Whitebird.
Commission.
NAMI. NAMI sent somebody,
Board
the
member.
Vet Center, the VA, and then a number of
Human
internal
Rights.
people, Human Rights Commission. Scott attended. Did you make it? You one day.
One day.
One of the days as part of the police commission. And it was twofold. It was to share with people what we do, how we do them, and then to extract feedback on how we can be doing it better and what a policy should look like, what our policy should look like. And then, and what we really heard loud and clear was that the group as a whole wanted a policy that was short, clear, and concise about what the expectation was and what our priority was, and then a policy or a procedure that clearly outlined the what's, when's, how's, and how these things evolve and what our responsibilities are. And so what we started with here is a very short policy that's essentially the guiding principle or I don't know, there's probably better words for that, but kind of the overarching theme of what our priorities are when it comes to dealing with armed barricaded subjects. And that's what you're looking at here. The next phase of this is meeting with our people that are experts in how we handle these. And then extracting the current hostage and barricaded subjects policy, which is nearly purely procedural, and figuring out a format of working that into a bigger procedure that even goes beyond where it is now. And it is mostly the show up, set up, safety, that kind of stuff, which is mostly the same for any sort of a dangerous location. So it may be that procedure is titled something more along the lines of dangerous location response. And then from there, splintering out into other things. But that's a much bigger topic that's going to take some time to work through. And I'm not an expert in any of that. So we'll be pulling people in that have a lot more experience than I do to get to that point. But where we're at here is pretty clearly, and I know it's a little bit different than what we've usually had, but it is somewhat the direction when we're able to of what I've been trying to do, which is having policies that are policy, and then procedures or operating manuals that are procedures or operating manuals. And it's a little bit difficult because you don't want to have two places to look to try to figure out how you handle something. So some things are going to need to have the procedural stuff in it, and some things can be extracted out. And this is one of those where we can't extract it out because the armed barricaded subjects is a pretty specific thing where the response and how we handle that and a number of other kinds of calls that are similar is a kind of a different topic, even though they go hand in hand. So with that, there were very few concerns from the last meeting. We did separate out in order to try to give a little bit of exclamation to the first line. The Eugene Police Department holds as one of its greatest values the sanctity of life. We did make that its own line rather than having it included in the first paragraph. And there was a mistake that I'd made by not, we initially started it out with the discussion being called lone armed barricaded subjects, and then we cut out the lone because that doesn't necessarily, when the rubber meets the road, that made it too restrictive. And other than that, those are the comments that we had through that discussion. I think that covers my piece of that, so.
Have any comments? Or? Go ahead, Scott.
It's a question, because I don't know where, it may not even fit in this at all, but part of that discussion on that first day was a case of study of where, I think it was two brothers, whatever, they followed the person in and there was threats made, so then they waited, surrounded it overnight, and then at 8 o'clock in the morning, I think it was, the decision was made that we need to remove this individual. And it was kind of like an arbitrary decision. It seemed like it was like we've been out there this long, it was cold, and it just, we got to this point where, and I thought, well, you gotta back that up a couple more hours, maybe the community wouldn't be out and about, 8 o'clock in the morning versus 4 in the morning, fewer people out on the roads and all that. And then I know that on the 18th in Chambers area, we had, I think, a couple days worth of, so what's the decision making, or does that belong in here at all? And when the de-escalation piece ceases, or?
Yeah, and that's really where the procedural side comes. And every situation is different. It's, I think I commented on it last time, that everything we do is the same. Every domestic is a domestic, and yet every single one is different. You just never know. And while even when you get there and it's totally different, it's all the same. And so it creates this weird dynamic where it really depends on a lot of things. When it rises to the level of a SWAT call out and you have the negotiations team out, if you're having productive conversation, the negotiations team is telling the commanders, just hold, we're talking, let us keep talking. That's the basis for negotiations. It's time heals everything. You wear somebody down, you can only be angry for so long. Eventually, you calm down, you off-gas all that stuff, and that's what the negotiators are doing, is keeping conversation going. And you're wearing the person down so that their heightened emotion settles down, and then rational thought starts to seep back in, and they realize, maybe this isn't the position that I want to be in. But depending on how productive the conversation is, depending on how much they're actually answering the phone. I mean, it's just it's a delicate balance of weaving your way through that scenario, and that's why it's very hard to have a detailed procedure or A, B, C, D, because these things jump out around all over the place. You can have productivity and you think that somebody's calming down, and then you say the wrong word and poof, they're spun up again. Part of the negotiations team is you've got a second person sitting there listening, and they're writing things not to say, things that seem to be helpful, things that are important to the person, and the inside of the van is actually whiteboards everywhere because they're taking notes on all of this stuff to keep track of it. And you just never know. And so that's where it is difficult. You've also got to manage officer fatigue. You've got to manage, it's starting to get light, and we're trying to wait as long as we can, but adding people in society into the mix definitely adds a degree of risk to everybody. And so then it's like, okay, well, we just got to get this over with because that risk supersedes the other risk. And I don't know the circumstances specifically, I don't recall, and I don't know that incident specifically. But sometimes that decision is made. It's like, well, we got to get this, we got to move this along because these other things. And we didn't do it 2 hours ago because we really didn't want to have to. So we're waiting till the last possible minute. And there's a million considerations. And everybody wants it to end peacefully. So.
Absolutely.
Claire?
So I had a question about the 804.2 section, and how it, whether or not it should relate or have some reference to the de-escalation policy, or if these are all likely to be reviewed in tandem by an officer in terms of their understanding of these policies. Those things, that points to the de-escalation.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then my other question, I'll wait till we are talking about the de-escalation piece. But, well, I guess I'll just bring it up kind of as foreshadow. I recall after the fatal shooting of Mr. Babb that there, I believe, was a statement from the chief at the time about changing policies so that if there was an opportunity to bring a mental health professional into the situation, into the conversation, or onto the phone, that would be one of the things that would be attempted. But I don't see that necessarily reflected in either of those policies.
Yeah, and that's probably to a degree of detail for where we're at with the armed barricades that it wouldn't go in there. I know the crisis negotiation team specifically, we would not have officers or patrol folks or command that aren't trained bringing in somebody like that. And so would relate as a C&T function.
Oh, okay.
To relate to with the mental health professional and to figure out how to move that forward. We call that third-party intermediaries, TPIs. And it's it is not recommended in negotiations to use a third-party intermediary because oftentimes you can't control what they're going to say or how they're going to say it. You can't control necessarily what the person's true response will be to that person. I saw case study after case study where agencies at the end tried to relent, tried to give him something. There's one story in particular that comes to mind, and the guy wanted to talk to his wife, demanded to talk to his wife, and he said, "This is all your fault." Boom, killed himself with her on the phone with him. And so you run that risk of what is their motive for wanting to talk to somebody, and so pulling in a professional to be able to help them consult on the scenario and what may or may not work, or prior knowledge that they have about the person, is certainly good, and we've started doing that. It's been something that's been talked about on the negotiations team for a long time, and I know that there's more of that happening, and I'm looking forward to seeing the new C&T policy that's been reviewed by the supervisor and the previous SWAT lieutenant who used to be a negotiator as well. And I haven't seen that yet. I've asked for it, and they're not at a point where they're ready to move it forward.
So there's another set of related policies
Yeah, so that
for
would be
that unit.
That would be a CNT specific kind of an activity to be involved in, and so that's something that's a guiding direction that would need to be as part of their unit policy, and so I'm hoping that it's in there, and I'm guessing that it is. I just haven't seen it yet.
May I just say something about having a mental health professional? So, I actually did that, and we had that in place when I came to the Carrollton Police Department as the chief. We had a very good relationship with the mental health professional. And not just any mental health professional can do that. One of the issues is that mental health professional never talked to the individual. Their role was strictly an advisory role. They were in the van with the negotiators, and their role was twofold. One is for the help of on a long negotiation, there's a mental health aspect with the negotiators. The second one was that she was also listening to the negotiations along with the second person who was writing the notes. And she heard a clue, a trigger word, a response that gave her a clue. She was also writing notes to the negotiator. The purpose of that negotiator, though they can change the negotiator in the process, that's a handoff. But it is very well defined by the negotiating team. The main thing is you want to have a consistency, because when you break that negotiation, you also break the pace of that negotiation. And she was very good at it, and she would tell you that just not everybody who's in mental health can do that. They're very specific, and so very few teams had that advantage. We just were lucky, but they would never. It'd be, and I would just put my 2 cents worth in. It'd be inappropriate to break the negotiation from the people doing there and bring a mental health professional in, because that can really change a dynamic that it might be positive, but quite frankly, it would be uncontrollable unless you had somebody who was really, really in tune with this negotiation process. I'm just adding that in. I don't know when that came up, but that's not done a lot, except where there's a lot of resources for that kind of thing. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might just, at the beginning, put a pointer to the CMT policy as a way of addressing part of that concern
Yeah.
in the list of related policies. Or instead of equipment, you could say resources and add a little coda that says, including resources that may be available outside of police. And that way you're not second guessing their expertise on the scene, but just prompting a reminder, hey, don't think this is the only toolkit you have. Either way,
Yeah.
I don't.
Well, that's why we list the references,
Sure.
and I do try to not list other policies buried in the body of a policy, because sometimes numbers change or policies go away. And if they're all right up top, it's a lot easier to know which ones we're dealing with. And so it's happened a couple of times where you want to put it in so that it's specific and that section reminds you, but it's really important that we leave those listed in one place. And so that's where the de-escalation policy is
Sorry, I didn't
referenced.
see that.
Yeah, but there's method to that, and it's something, the little things that I chew over when I'm sitting in my office. But that was one of those that, as we actually did the POM conversion a year and a half ago, it created a lot of time and effort to dig through to catch all of those things. So
Right.
I've been on a vendetta to pull them all out, suck them into one place, and simplify. Yeah.
Anybody have anything else on this policy? If we don't, if we're comfortable with what we have here, I entertain a motion on this.
I'll move to approve, unless somebody else has something. I'll move to approve policy number 804, armed barricaded sections.
Scott seconds. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect.
Fantastic, thank you. So the de-escalation is interesting because it was discussed through that same forum, and it's a topic that relates to the armed barricade, but it has really been a topic of discussion upstairs around my office because of some IAs that have come up. And there's one in particular where the behavior that took place when you just listed the bullet points of what happened was within policy. But when you looked at it, it was like, how is that within policy? No, I mean, it was, we're not talking about anything terrible, the end of the world, but it was enough that it was like, there's a change that needs to take place, but it is very, very subtle. And so I kind of actually had to dig in and do my own little interview, a few folks that were involved in it to try to figure out where were we at, how did we land at this spot? And then it really occurred to me that de-escalation, when we started this process, was a fairly new concept. And the wording and the way that we did it, we plugged it in as a single line in our use of force policy.
Right.
But it really encompassed everything, and all of our force options all reference back to the use of force as you cascade down the line of how we're allowed to do our thing. And I initially had just expanded it to an entire section in the use of force policy. And then that brought us to the armed barricaded thing. It's like, no, we just need a whole policy that talks about de-escalation. And so that's where we're at with having an entire policy. And this will trigger an adjustment where we'll remove any description of de-escalation in either policy and reference you back to here. And so it'll simplify, and then we don't run the risk of having different definitions or different languages in different places. And so that's where we landed with this as it is. And it's funny because it kind of swirled side by side with the armed barricaded thing, and yet had come up on its own. And then they sort of went hand in hand as we've marched down the process now.
Although, obviously, de-escalation applies in all sorts of scenarios.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, which is why it really is its own thing,
Yeah.
because it's a daily, and we put the buzzword de-escalation to it, but the reality is that lots of cops have been doing it forever. I mean, you certainly have some through the history that have been quicker to ask, tell, make, and you've certainly had some that don't like to get to the make if they don't have to, and backpedal more and are willing to talk more. It's certainly become more important and stressed more that that's expected, but it's not a new thing either. So I think it's important for people to realize that too, that it's not that we weren't doing this before we inserted the word in the expectation there. Because a lot of people haven't and have done a great job of it over the years. So my dad was a police officer here for 29 years. Retired 12 ago. And he actually shared with me the other day that he never actually hit somebody with a baton in 29 years. And he worked the street nearly his entire career. So, but he was a talker and didn't like to fight. So. But I just thought that was interesting. And that's been, I mean, he started in the late 70s. So when we came to this one, there was a question about the listing and the ordering. The order that they're in really isn't an order in particular. They're all important, and they all have bearing at different times in different circumstances. They all just have to be listed in some way, shape, or form. So we talked about that. It was important that communication is a pretty significant part of this whole thing, and so that's the one that was pushed to the top intentionally, and that was a suggestion from one of our detectives who's been a negotiator in 2 stints. She's currently on the negotiations team and was earlier in her career as well. And then we had a discussion about section 2, or number 2 on the back, the second page. And I made a minor change there, and I figured I'd kind of wait and see what folks thought tonight. And initially it had said, officers, when time and circumstances reasonably permit, officers shall consider and accommodate whether a subject's lack of compliance. And so we had a number of discussions. There was a general consensus that officers shall assess was a better word to use. And then the accommodate was one that we didn't really come to a consensus, but folks didn't necessarily like it, didn't really not like it, but we were a little unsettled with that. And then And the list, the bullet point list of things, we added emotional response or fear as an additional consideration. So I'm curious what folks' thoughts are on the entire thing, but also on the accommodate, assess and accommodate when possible portion of that.
Well, I guess I have a question of how this verb accommodate is trying to be used. What is trying to be communicated there?
My purpose there is that people should assess what's happening, and then if the circumstances allow, because they realize that there's something else impacting, and they can take a different approach to specifically work with that issue. Say it's somebody that's severe Asperger's and they're non-communicative. If you can identify that you think that may be happening, well then you're gonna change your approach to accommodate that issue in order to try to work around it. You're not gonna keep yelling at somebody the same thing over and over, and then I mean, that's not gonna get you anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the goal, that's what I was trying for.
I guess the wordsmith in me would want to pull that out to a separate sentence to say, when time and circumstance reasonably permits, officer shall assess whether a subject's lack of compliance, and then the list, and seek to accommodate, to make an accommodation for those if possible,
Okay.
But it might not be necessary if your officers understand what's being said here. You don't have to satisfy my English grammar needs.
Well, I understand it, so everybody else should, right? Maybe.
I mean, that's what I figured was being said, but
From a patrol standpoint, what's your gut reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little, the accommodation is that's a good question, and how people are gonna perceive what that means. Yeah, it's tough. It's like, and it depends on, I guess when I look at that, I think, well, what are we dealing with? Is it a crime? Is somebody going to jail? Or is it somebody that's just trespassing that the business owner just wants them to move along? Well, they have two broken legs. We don't know how to accommodate that, cahoots or whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's common sense also that depending on those situations, that officers are going to assess it and accommodate severe needs.
Or adjust.
Or adjust, or whatever, when it's, again, we always use the word reasonable, it seems, but,
so, yeah, so I'm not so much worried about how officers, I just want to know if this language makes sense to a patrol officer, and reading that, they'll go, oh, I'm supposed to try to figure out if this subject has one of these things influencing their behavior, and I should make some accommodation for that if I'm able.
Yeah, I think that is.
That says
that's
that to
clear.
you. Okay,
Yeah,
then
I
I'm
don't-
fine with it.
Yeah.
I initially didn't even have the accommodate, I just had assess, and then it occurred to me, well, I assessed it, and then I did whatever I wanted.
Right.
Yeah, no, I think the accommodate is
Seemed like there
important.
needed to be a second little bit.
And I like your list. I think that's very appropriate things to be trying to determine.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, there's a lot of situations where those conversations are had when people are in handcuffs. So, you have assessed the situation, you're gonna just detain them while you figure out what is going on because of their actions or whatever. And they oftentimes come right out of handcuffs. And that, I agree, I think that list it's a good list, and it's something that we deal with every day, all day long.
Well, yeah, and during the time that we had the dog ban downtown, I heard a story from a couple of different sources of a man who had severe anxiety and was confronted by officers about his dog as he was walking through downtown, and he had a very unhappy encounter, which he was later able to talk to, I think, a sergeant about. He got a call back, and I think he was glad to be able to have that conversation. But in the moment, I don't know if the officers were able to get that he was having a panic attack, essentially, rather than trying to be aggressive or resistant or any of the other things we might assume from somebody who's exhibiting that kind of behavior. So I think this is super important.
I think we have Marty has a question or comment.
Oh, I just want to say thank you. It's surprisingly difficult to make a concise statement of culture and values. But we all know what it means. I think this is what we're aiming for, and I think it's what we've made a lot of progress towards at EPD, and I really appreciate your work you put in. That's all I have.
Are we ready for a motion?
Does anybody have anything else? We will take a motion.
I move that we approve, recommend, what is it, whatever we do with that? The policy 803, the de-escalation policy.
We approve.
We approve policy 803.
Okay, have a second? Second from Marty? Okay. Any other discussion? And all those in favor? Say
Hi.
All
Raise
opposed?
my hand.
Thank you. All right.
Can I ask a quick clarification as we move forward? Are we just reviewing unmanned aerial systems, or are we trying to improve it?
No, we're still in the review process, and that was a little bit about what Sergeant Williams asked us to talk about, and we'll use an opportunity as after we've discussed the policy to talk about looking at doing an outreach
Sure.
in the next few weeks with the public. If we want to hold another meeting, that we'll invite the public to come in and talk to us about what their feelings are. If the police department uses drones sort of in the way that we've designed this policy, and then that way we can come back the next month and really be able to make a recommendation if this is something that we want to say we're comfortable, or if there's more questions, because the citizens that talk to us have some real concerns that if we can or can't address it in policy.
That sounds great. More pragmatically, I have another meeting I'm already late for, so I was trying to decide how long you need me to stay and not break quorum for you. But I can stick around and make comments.
Are you going to need a vote on this?
On the drone?
Yeah.
No, we won't need a vote on that.
Yeah. Didn't want to leave you in large.
Oh.
Right, you want to do a public forum.
So, okay, so we may need, if you're gonna leave, we're probably gonna need a motion, decision on whether we wanna hold another meeting, a public forum before the next meeting, and that's what I think Sergeant Williams would like us to do. The police department would like to have that feedback before they go continue to move forward with this policy, so.
I don't know that you guys necessarily need to go through this before making, I mean, I would think you could.
How about I
have
make that
discussion
motion?
right now.
How about I make a motion that we recommend to the police that they hold a public forum to allow the public to see the operation of the drone?
Yeah, I think we want.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're going to ultimately make the decision on whether this policy, we feel comfortable with saying that this is a policy that they can then take forward and see if, I don't know if council needs to, will ultimately have to decide whether this can be put in place. But I think we need to make sure that we're comfortable saying that we would like to have this trial period of this policy run. So, so that's what, so let's talk about that. Is that how that sounds to everybody? Should we have to try to set up in the next 2 to 3 weeks a public forum that we all will attend and listen to public testimony about this policy and the future use of unmanned aerial systems?
To the extent we can invite the police to bring the drone and or if it's possible to demonstrate it, just so people don't. I think drones in the abstract are a terrifying image, but I say this as someone in the Air Force. The reality of what we're talking about here is substantially different than what people will immediately think of. So, having a conversation piece there is a useful exercise, and may actually inform kind of policy we talk about in terms of size and capabilities. If we do want to look at, what that's going to mean. Are we going to say anything up to 2,000 pounds, or are we going to say anything under whatever the FAA's current restrictions are, which are actually pretty light?
55 pounds.
There you go. You look that much. Well, it'll still give you a headache if it falls on your head.
That would be a very, very, very large device to get to 55 pounds.
Definitely don't fly to Dodson. Somebody did.
So the question is, do we feel that this, so this is a pilot project with the?
Yeah, it'd be a pilot project.
Yeah, are we trying to figure out if it's rises to the level of needing a separate public forum, or are we being requested to schedule a public forum?
So the department is requesting, they would like to get.
Posted by the
public-
police commission.
Yes, would like to get public feedback that would come through the commission about the feeling of having drones used in this pilot program in this way.
I'm certainly supportive of holding such a forum. I personally cannot say that I would be available to attend such a forum, so that, you know, gives me a little chagrin to say, sure, go ahead, put on a meeting.
I guess the flip side of it could be that I think it would be beneficial, and that's where the request came from, but you bring up an interesting point where perhaps it's too early for that, and since it is a pilot project, that perhaps the police commission moved to hold that forum at the end of the pilot project, assuming we got to that point. And I guess I would put it up to you all on whether or not you believe that having a public forum at this point, because of the topic, the sensitivity of the topic, I would leave it up to you on whether or not you all think it's important, because you're the public body that we gather info from, and so whether or not you all feel that you can make that recommendation, or would benefit from having that forum, so.
Edward?
What I think might be valuable is some sort of open house or informational session that's hosted by the police commission, and then refers people to a way they can either submit comment via email or attend our next police commission meeting and give public comment. What I worry is if we just say the police commission is asking you to come tell them what you think about police using drones, everyone's going to come out with a predisposition of what it's about and what it's going to do, and they're going to tell us heck no, and it'll set what's actually a very reasonable and fairly well constrained pilot program way back. Whereas if it were an informational session where people could come and learn about what's being proposed, understand the technology, and really get a clear understanding of the constraints, and I don't know if this is doable at all, but if there was some way to involve a group like the ACLU or something like that as a component of that, so that there's a trustworthy, outside of the police group that's saying, we think this is worth talking about. That might help, and then we could steer the comment back to the commission, which we could then relay back to you. Because then we have the education component that helps folks get what's going on, and then give them time to gnaw on it before asking for their opinions without having a chance to really learn.
And I'm open to any of it. I would just like to see us be successful with implementing it eventually. So that's my driving motivation here.
Yeah, I think Edward's point is excellent, and might take a little bit of time to set up, and so, it might be all right for the pilot to be launched while we organize that kind of information session. In addition, that's an opportunity to put out a press release and get some press to come to such an informational session, and that's a sexy topic to report on, and so that could generate more public input as a result.
Well, and if we were moving forward with the program, we would have more ability to be more detailed and have more equipment likely. The police department doesn't own one. This is mine personally.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's quite all right. I'm happy to use it in whatever way to kind of help this process move along. I brought it tonight because I think that what we think of in our mind is not always what we're looking at,
right,
especially as technology has progressed. So that doing that later certainly will probably provide additional benefit as well.
Is this something that you're planning on implementing the pilot right away?
If I was king.
No.
So there is, I've just been pulled into a group within the city, the division managers and plus one are pulling together a meeting, and I don't know when that's going to be, but to get the different city divisions on the same page. And I don't know what kinds of barriers. We do have some barriers to implementing it. I don't believe at this point that the police department, the director could just sign a paper and we'd be off and running. There is a current memorandum from the city manager saying that the fire department will be the only department that flies. So there are some barriers in place that I think are breaking down quickly as, again, laws and technology and public perception and knowledge comes around. My hope would be that within 3 to 6 months, that we're having serious internal talks within 2 to 3 months about how to make it work, and then rolling within by May, June, identifying a supervisor. And then beginning the pilot, which is, there's going to be a lot of legwork. There's a lot of getting the pilot certification, the 107, Part 107 certification, and I mean, some of it's listed in here, the SOP, like identifying exactly which piece of equipment we want to use, what fits our needs the best, because there's a lot of stuff out there right now, so.
I'm sorry, I just mentioned that because it's similar to the CCTV policy that was identified as a pilot with no imminent plan to implement.
Right.
But setting up the rules so that should it become a go, we didn't then have to figure out how to make a policy. So this is a just-in-case policy at this point.
My goal is that we're marching forward.
Right.
Yeah.
But as of right now, we're not,
Yeah.
there's no.
And there's positive support towards it. In fact, the city manager wandered by my office a while back, and we spoke about it briefly, and he said, pilot project, pilot project, pilot project.
He just was wandering through the building and.
I think he was coming out of a meeting. My office just happens to be conveniently located for those brief conversations.
So, I think it's easier to get people engaged, it's probably pretty obvious, if they think something is coming, if it's not an ambiguous sometime in the future.
Yeah.
So if there's, I mean, it sounds like you don't really have a hard date, but if there's some way we can communicate that this is not 3 years down the line,
Yeah.
that we really want you to pay attention to this now. I don't know how we can do that without a specific date, but.
Well, and that would be another reason to hold off on holding a forum and letting some of these city meetings take place and get a better feel for where we're at internally.
I think this is a win for the city and for the department if we're able to move forward with it eventually. If you do go the information route, which I think that's a good idea as well, I think it'd be wise to give some examples of past scenes, past calls that we've gone to, high-risk things. I mean, there'd be a plethora of crash scenes and things like that, but I think that's probably going to be the most important piece of information for the citizens to hear is, at least that's my opinion, that what are the high-risk scenes? There's a lot of people that don't think the Bearcat should have showed up to the bad call. That's it. So that's, now, I don't want to get into all that, but there's plenty of examples where we could have launched something like this to assess the situation and get a better picture moving forward. So I think there's probably an opportunity to plug some department stuff if that's the route we're going.
So I threw myself in the queue. So it sounds like we're sort of working down the path that, sort of like the CCTV, that, we can approve a policy that we're comfortable with as a commission, saying that if this pilot operated, the program operated like we've set up this policy, then we would be comfortable with letting it go then through the process of, can it be implemented in the department? And then circle back around as the pilot program either starts or comes back in, and then maybe start to have those open houses or public forums, and then discuss that, as maybe we can then have some actual examples that we used it because it was only allowed to be used in this sort of circumstance. Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, that'd be great. Great with me. And we're going to be proactive with the media, with doing the show and tell with the media once we're at the point of making that happen and being transparent with the usage and getting them out there to see what we have and whatnot. So.
Sure, and I would expect that. I think the difference a little bit with the forum and having the medias there is then you have the public interacting with your technology, and then there's a real directive that we want to hear what you think about this. You know, we may be on, you know, we've had a pilot project or we're about to launch, however the timing works out. That I think that just generates more attention to this commission and the role we play to take that public feedback.
Marty, did you have something?
Yeah, I will say, in jest, as a former budget committee member, anything that gets us farther away from buying helicopters is a good thing. Given
Oh, my
the checkered
Lord.
history of helicopter expenses in police operations in this country. But in all seriousness, is it, you know, it's not a tool for every situation, but it is a cheap and effective tool for certain situations. And I think in the long haul, providing the police with the tools to do their job effectively and, you know, to preserve public life and safety is a good thing. So in general, I'm in favor, but I think there is, you know, this predicate delay with the public about, no, we're not talking about Predator drones. We're talking about a small thing that you know, I think we could all think of situations where one might have been used and it would have changed the character of the interaction, you know, and that's for the police to determine on the scene, you know, what's the right tool. But the more tools we can give them, I think the more likely they are to end up with a good result.
Edward?
I would just encourage that however we approach the timing and phasing of it, that we don't ask the public for feedback unless we plan on it directly impacting the way we implement something. So if we're going to seek public feedback before the launch of the pilot program, we need to have a period of time in which we would amend the pilot program based on the feedback. If we're going to do the pilot program and then seek public feedback, that makes a lot of sense as well, but we need to be comfortable with the fact that the public may not love that we decided to launch this pilot program with drones without seeking their input other than, you know, the wonderful 10 people around the table here. So that would just be working in a public agency that oftentimes is accused of making decisions without asking first. I would just say we've learned that lesson and I hope you avoid that mistake.
Yeah. Well, framing the question, or framing the beginning of it, and giving some of the background would go a long ways in once you start to advertise it. It would be easier to give data and to be able to give examples if that forum took place well into the pilot program and make it clear that there's language in the pilot program policy that will be required to change with the full implementation. And so there's no question about whether or not there's going to be a period of readjusting and reevaluating the policy, because it's not a policy that then has a memo attached to it that says, well, actually, from this period to this period, we're only going to do this. I mean, it's part of the paper, so.
Yeah, and there's a very public report too.
Yeah.
So with this discussion, so do we want to then just work on the policy? Is that what I'm hearing? And we'll just approve a policy and then we'll go from there as it starts to get implemented. Okay. Does that work?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, this is a great discussion. This is probably better than even just saying, yes, we'll hold a forum. And very thoughtful. So yeah, no, that sounds fantastic.
Good. Then we will move on and talk about the policy then a little bit again, and knowing that we'll probably bring this back again next month because we're getting run a little short on
Next
time.
month, maybe. I'm hoping that that we can really be critical with what's in here and don't hold back. Let's make sure that what we have is right. And if it takes an extra month to get to that point, then I'm not so hard charging for it that I want to skip that step. So, and this is me. I've made this, but I've got thick skin. So. This is a combination, so this policy's come together as a combination of Lexipol recommended policy, there's an law enforcement aviation association, and I'm blanking the exact name, but they've got a draft proposal policy for this stuff, as well as policies from other agencies around the US and a couple of agencies in Oregon that I've reviewed as part of putting this together. So there's definitely some procedural stuff in here. I've hesitated to even put any of that in, but I do think it helps frame, to be able to see kind of what we're talking about. And some of that may be stuff that once we get through the pilot, that the procedural all comes out, and that's part of the operations manual. But I went ahead and put it in just so that you guys can all see where I'm coming from, and the level of consideration that we're going to take in implementing this, if we're able to. And so the pilot program will run from 1 year from the date it is implemented. EPD shall purchase and maintain at least 3 UAS systems for the duration of the pilot program. At the conclusion of the pilot, a report will be made to the Chief of Police for consideration of extending or implementing a full program. And actually, the last section in there includes the Police Commission as the final reporting as well. So obviously, it's the Chief of Police that will make the decision on whether or not to continue, but later on in the reporting, the report also comes back to the Police Commission. And really, realistically, will trigger a review of the policy yet again, and the Police Commission would be involved in that. Purpose and scope. So the funny thing about this, and it's hard to frame in because this is a technology that can spread into a lot of different things that we do. The bomb robot is pretty specific in what the bomb robot can do or does. The Bearcat is pretty specific in what circumstances and situations that it's used in. The CNT gear is pretty specific in what it does. And this is unique in that every one of those teams and scenarios can be augmented by one of these machines, and about 100 other places in the department. So it really is then impacted by a lot of policies. At the same time, it is a camera on an invisible pole. It's essentially really what it is. And so the main other policies that are impacted by it are evidentiary policies, because all it is gathering data and likely evidence when there's a crime or a critical incident occurring, generally. And if there isn't that digital evidence, then it's being used to render scenes safe for other scenarios. So, or non-criminal search and rescue type stuff where there isn't a criminal nexus and then there isn't going to be digital evidence as part of it. So you'll notice that the video recording and monitoring of events, field photographs and digital images, outside agency assistance, evidence, and property handling are the main ones that I've listed, because those are the ones that people may not think of, and you could probably list the entire POM in that as any incident, every policy could potentially come into play in some way or form here. So. But that's how I came to having those as the referenced sections. Policy. And I won't read through every bit of it, but the Oregon legislature has made it pretty easy for us because they've already told us when and how and what reporting requirements we have. And it's very restrictive, and yet it still gives us plenty of opportunity to be able to utilize the tool. And that's sort of with House Bill 2710. They're now codified in ORS, and those are listed down the line here. The UAS definition, remote piloting command, and visual observer. Visual observer doesn't need to be somebody who would be on the team, but it would be a designated post. It says here that they would be trained by a police employee, a piloting command who've obtained and maintained the valid. Well, the training for a visual observer can take all of about 5 minutes. It really is. It's just somebody that's watching the device, but it's important to note that it's important when possible to have a VO. Front page, any thoughts, concerns, input? Privacy and prohibited use have some areas that commingle, and I'm aware of that, but because they're probably the biggest areas of concern, I went ahead and left them with the separate titles and separate areas, even though there are some things that are similarly stated. I also looked at the CCTV policy for some of the privacy concern issues, because the reality is that it's darn near the same thing. It's a camera in the sky, and it seemed like, hopefully, I could head off some of the concerns of the police commission by looking at things that you've already told us. So that's where those sections came from.
And also the body worn camera?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As well as pulling from, obviously, other policies. Most all the policies have these sections in them. Any thoughts or concerns there or suggestions?
The one thing I will say in the privacy section, C, the use of facial recognition technology, that was a big discussion when we did the CCTV, and it actually came up at a meeting that was held over in the law school about that policy, that we went there and they were, a lot of people thought that wasn't in the policy, and they were talking about, and we had to point it out to them that, no, that was one of our main things that we went in there that would not be used that way. And so I'm glad to see that we put that in.
That's the primary one that came right out of the CCTV policy.
Because that was a big issue.
Yeah, and I recall that, even though I kind of came in on the tail end of that. I wasn't part of the discussion, but I saw some of the notes, and I knew that it had been talked about a lot. That was relayed to me that was an important component of that, so. Requirements for use. So I initially, in the version that we looked at last time, I did not have 1208.8.5.1. The ORSs basically give all of the descriptions of when and how they're likely to evolve and change, and we're also likely to be impacted by case law moving forward as agencies begin to have them. And rather than listing out and telling the details of how and when, and then having it change and then having a policy that's incorrect, I try to limit that and then send us to the actual source so that we know that we're getting the latest and greatest. So the section D there, that lists out the ORSs that give us the rules, the box that we need to stay in. But then includes additional, a handful of other things. So we only want certified pilots flying machines, particularly on missions. There's probably a period of training where everybody's not going to be certified, it's only to get some practice, and so there's going to be some leniency for training. We need to be in accordance with the Part 107 regulations, and that includes, there will be a slew of waivers to apply for flying at night, flying over people, flying multiple in the same vicinity, and those are all waivers that I haven't heard of anybody having any issues getting. It's just a process of applying and waiting for the FAA to move very quickly to get that approval process done. I did decide to go ahead and add, and it was actually a couple other organ agencies had it included in their policies, and it also makes sense as a quick reference. We'll just need to be on top of it to make sure that things don't change. The UAS shall only be operated by APD section, and that's kind of a down and dirty of what the ORSs state. But they do give you a good idea of the legal basis for which we're allowed on a bigger picture setting. The 1208.6 EPD allowed pilot program use then cuts down a little bit and makes it more clear what kinds of incidents we're going to be able to use these on. The long-term goal being that 1208.6 would hypothetically just be deleted, and we just follow the previous section, which is the legal basis, and we use it as we need when we see fit, as long as we're following the rest of the guidelines.
But I do like it limited in this pilot program to be sort of.
Yeah. So the primary purposes are for evidence gathering, scene documentation, crime scenes, crash scenes, other major incident scenes. Those. Go ahead.
So we're running a pilot here, and one of our concerns is the folks' perception of its use and everything, but most of these kind of are negative type events. Is there any place in the pilot, for instance, in the park or trails, that you could set up a table and maybe run the drone down the river to look at the trails and make sure people are safe, don't have any medical emergencies? And oh, by the way, that's a great way to talk to the community, show technology and I mean, every one of these is something negative. It reinforces the fact that you're surveillance. You're looking at me. I'm a criminal if I see the drone in my vicinity, except for the search rescue one.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I actually kind of have the opposite perspective on that. I mean, I think if I was jogging down the pre-trail and saw a drone fly over my head, I'd be like, what the heck? And I might not know that UPD has a special table set up to kind of talk to the public about it. But if I see, oh, you're trying this out to deal with a crime scene or a major emergency, I'm like, oh, that's a positive use of the technology. You see, because I was
see
thinking
flip
about
side.
like a protest or a march or a rally, that might be a great place to try this out, to pilot this, but I could also see that
Oh, yeah.
getting a really negative reaction from the public. So I get what you're saying, that these are,
And I was thinking the technology that we're sponsoring downtown with the high-speed internet and all the
Right.
techniques that we do have, they
Yeah.
probably think, oh, this is kind
A
of
lot of
cool. And
great stuff.
it'd bring
Yeah.
people to the table to talk to.
so there could be
Or
like,
something like that.
I mean, there could be demonstration time, so maybe a opportunity in this pilot for demonstrations is what you're trying to get at.
It's something that's a
Yeah.
little more interactive that
Yeah.
doesn't make it look like it's always going to be used for something.
Maybe where it's actually flying at the location of where the table's at though, so that
Right.
somebody just doesn't
Just
see
in that
the Big
vicinity.
Brother black helicopter go flying by. And we're out just
Lights
surveilling the
flashing.
bike, we're just surveilling the bike path.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could certainly add something for public outreach as a component.
Yeah.
All of these are isolated locations where we run fewer risks of privacy concerns because the scene documentations, crash scenes are going to be out in the open highway, open roads, intersections. It's going to be at places where we already own the street in the area and there's no mystery that the police are there. Crime scenes, by the time we're putting this up to document a crime scene, these guys will have already written search warrants, giving us approval and authority to use it. It's going to be in an isolated area where it's no mystery to anybody that there's a major crime that's occurred here.
Okay.
And so again, correlates the use of the equipment to what we're doing and limits the scope of where we wind up with concerns about privacy, where we're not just out flying around over people's places or property. Explosive disposal unit is one where it's just silly not to include, because if we can avoid sending a person up on a suspicious package, the bomb truck is stored at a facility that's now getting moved clear out
Further
to
away.
West Eugene. So you've got to have somebody that drives out there to go get the truck, to drive that out, to then load up the big old robot, drive it out, slowly drive it down to where the thing is. I can have that launched in 6 minutes, and I carry it in a shoulder bag. So within 10 minutes, I can be somewhere in the city and set it up, fly it around in a circle, and take a bunch of picture and high definition video, and they can then sit there and look at it and evaluate what they're dealing with. And just like that, we've got an evaluation. Also, depending on what the scenario is, and this is the second part of it, search of the immediate area of a suspicious device for a secondary, and clearing the area of operation to ensure safety. So if they're set up next to a building, it'd be pretty nice to be able to put something up and look at the roof of the building, make sure there's not somebody or something there. And so that's why it's not just about the device, but it's making sure that the team and the area is safe as well, for the purpose of the pilot project. And then, of course, search and rescue, and that's a no-brainer. And again, trying to look at things where our use is isolated, or the potential of having it just out flying around outweighs, and we're an explanation to the public later, and they're like, well, yeah, okay. Of course, I'm glad that they had it out there and they were using it. We have somebody get lost out in the trail system in South Eugene. It'd be pretty silly if we had one of these with a FLIR camera to not be running a grid pattern overhead while we have people out searching the trails. What would the public say if they knew we had this other tool and somebody got injured or worse, and we didn't use the tool for that purpose. So it seems like a pretty safe use. And then Chief Kearns was pretty strong about, and kind of under that same premise, that if there's a scenario where we can dramatically improve the safety to the officers or the public, that it'd be ridiculous for us to not use it. So I was on a dog track for 2.5 hours as an officer once with a guy who'd been involved in a robbery where his buddy got killed by the victim. And he was armed with a gun, and we were searching the hills in southeast Eugene, going backyard to backyard, looking for an armed guy. And it would have been nice to have had a camera flying overhead with a FLIR on it that could be saying, yeah, we got nothing in front of you, you look like you're clear, and just one more layer of protection to help. Or, hey, there's something down in the bushes about 100 yards ahead of you, looks like there's a body laying down. Hey, is anybody out there? Nope, it's none of us. Okay, well, you need to be super careful. And so that's one scenario where it sure would have been nice to have had an eye in the sky looking over us. And it was a pretty spooky moment when we found him hiding in the bushes and took him into custody. So it was exciting for a minute.
Good old days.
Thanks.
It's
okay, no, you're deep in thought, so that's great. I want to make sure I understand it right. Is this last section, or this 1208.6, is this meant to have fewer allowed uses than will be formalized later? That's the intention to
Yeah,
kind of start out with? Because, okay, this is my, I think these are all great, and I'd actually be okay with facial recognition software. Maybe I'm just weird, but I'm okay with that. But you're probably not, yeah. But if I put myself in the place of someone who finds this whole program maybe a little uncomfortable for them, and I read these uses, when I get to D really feels to me like a catch-all where I can almost put anything in here. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what would not fit into these four? What kind of things would not fit in?
Can I read you what D used to say?
Yeah.
Because we had this discussion.
Okay.
And D used to say, when approved by the chief of police.
So it got a little better.
So we added that to try to vector
Very
that
much a
in.
catch-all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and unfortunately it is, but it tried to word it in a way that it's got to be a significant event.
Right.
And so there's all kinds of things, downtown team gets in a foot pursuit with somebody downtown. From the roof of this building, in about 7 minutes, I could have something flying over the street looking for somebody that's running from the officers. That wouldn't qualify here. There's no significant safety concern or safety issue. So there's all kinds of areas where eventually, someday, once people have become accustomed to, and we've got a system in place. I'm trying to think.
So basically, what you're trying to say here is, by improve the safety, it's someone who's really in imminent harm, maybe. You're trying,
Yeah.
So if it's just someone that you're trying to catch because you want to, it's better to just let them go. You're not going to bring in a...
Not for the duration of the pilot. Eventually, it would be nice to be able to. It'd be nice to, because there's always risk in everything. And so if we can drop that bar down, because we've proven to the public that we can handle this technology safely and respectfully, it would be nice to have that bar lower and utilize it more to increase our catch rate,
Right.
minimize the number of resources that it takes to do a lot of what we do. But yeah, trying to limit it to where it would, if anybody found out we had this available
Right.
and it could have saved somebody's life and we didn't just because the policy says you can't,
Right.
how would
Oh,
that
yeah.
look?
I have a few people in the queue. I have
Oh, okay.
Edward Claire and then Terry will be next. So.
Counselor Ye, that was the question I brought up last time when we looked at this policy, because I was pretty concerned that you could drive a
Right.
moderately sized truck through that hole.
Bearcat.
Yeah, drive a Mini Cooper through. But I think that this kind of helps to narrow it down a little. I mean, it definitely starts to put some framework around it. I'd also made the recommendation, I don't see it in the policy, but I don't know if it's in your brain, that this would be part that in the report it details any specific scenario where the chief exercised that, or at least I meant to bring that up. Maybe I didn't, I just thought of it. But that we, keep track of any case where beyond the specific permitted use, if the chief does authorize or the chief's designee authorizes it, that there's some sort of listing of what those were, so the public can see and understand where that was. And then a question that I had is that going back up to the 1208.8.5.1 E. It talks about assisting in an individual emergency if there's a reason to believe there's an imminent threat to life and safety of the individual. And then it talks about a report that must be filed. So in that scenario, would that apply pretty closely to what we would have in D in 1208.6? Does that
Maybe.
question make sense?
Maybe.
That's one possible scenario
So
at least.
basically, the E section is if it's not a warrant and, it's a little complicated. Give me just 1 second here.
Yeah.
Basically, anytime we're using it, for exigent circumstances, and we haven't obtained a warrant, and we haven't obtained written consent, and we haven't followed the other things, then we must provide a report to the circuit court
Got it.
within 48 hours, articulating the use and the whys, and that is a process that will have to be determined by the pilot program. So we'll need to go to the DA's office and figure out who do we go to, what kind of a form do we need. We're going to make a fill-in-the-blank form to make it simple and easy, but informative in what it needs. And every utilization of this, especially during the pilot project, but even moving forward, every utilization is going to be documented in it with an after-action report.
Yeah.
And if it was a chief's decision because of the life safety component, then that will certainly be documented as part of that. Especially if it's one of those where it's not clearly defined. We flew under section B2, period. Then there's going to be a fill in the blank section to articulate what that is, because we're going to be accountable for every time we use it. For an official sanctioned mission, there's going to be quite a bit. It's going to take a lot of training time to get people familiar and comfortable with the technology and willing to utilize it in a way that it can be used. So there's going to be a lot of flight time just for training. But certainly every mission will be clearly documented and then reported on. So.
Thanks.
Yeah. And we talk about that a little bit later in the.
Right, the after-action report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Is it?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, I guess I would just ask for if there's thoughts on adding language, or if there is a consensus on wanting more firm language about what level of catastrophe we need to be at to be able to approve that, or if this lends us to the severity and the intent well enough to get us there.
You speaking to item D specifically? I'm satisfied with the language, but I like Edward's suggestion of some kind of requirement for an affirmative report that explains what it was, how was safety at risk, or how did it assist in the preservation of life if it doesn't, during the pilot, if it doesn't fall under the other scenarios. And I'm not sure who that report should go to, if it should be the city manager, but also be made available to the public. But I was thinking of a scenario where, after the pilot is over, where that wouldn't qualify for D is, so, I just got, me and Councilor Semple got an email that Director James responded to, thank you very much, of a business owner who had some terrible tagging on his business, and really significant, and I could imagine a situation where having a drone to fly around in the alleys at certain times of day might be really helpful in finding taggers. That would also be kind of a civil liberties challenge. So, that might be very efficient and might help us find some, bad old taggers, but certainly wouldn't be justified, in any of these pilot project scenarios.
You have operational reporting there.
Yeah.
Later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a section on after-action reports. So I think what Sergeant was saying was that in the after-action report, they're going to report back what justification they used for exercising the drone. So in that after-action, we would catch
Okay.
if D was
Then
used.
I'm
It
good with
doesn't
that.
blend the second piece of that with the public immediate reporting, but part of this is gonna be reporting back and then doing the case studies and going through the uses and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking that it doesn't become a confidential document, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
That's what I was trying to speak to.
if someone wanted to request a copy of it, they could do
I
that.
would think so, yeah, I don't think we'd have any confidential, I mean, public records request, I think these would qualify for it.
Okay.
So
I'm not an expert on that,
The
so, but-
only caveat to that is that if this is used in a circumstance where we're gathering evidence for a criminal case.
Right.
It will not be releasable until such time as that case has been resolved. That's the only
Yeah.
thing I wanted to say. It certainly, these things are released to the public, but it's just like you don't release a arrest report, an affidavit for a search warrant until a certain time after it's served, and so we can get those. That's the only caveat I want to be sure.
Yeah, no, it's a good reminder.
Yeah.
Okay. Terry, I know you had
Just
something
quick,
to say.
just quick, I was just gonna say, it might alleviate that problem if you put when approved by the chief of police or their designee in exigent circumstances involving the safety of an officer or the public. And then that just makes that clear. Indeed. I have last week, so mine's in a different spot.
Oh, okay.
I mean, last month's.
I think it is.
So is there
Underlined
more to do
section.
than I have?
Yeah.
Oh, I see, yeah, oh, yeah. Yeah, I've just got the one-liner.
Let me see that.
Do you have the one-liner?
I might.
You've got the new
No,
one.
you got the new one.
Signo-
The
Yeah,
underlined
right.
section. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so at this point, I'm not seeing any changes to that section now that we've talked our way through this. Okay.
So, before we move on to the next section, I'm gonna see if maybe this is a good spot to maybe stop, because we're running out of time unless people want to extend the meeting. But if not, since this is gonna be one that we're gonna work on probably for the next couple months, so.
There's only 2 more pages.
Oh,
Oh, we're only 3 pages.
how controversial are they?
Easy.
Not.
How controversial is any of it? We're already through 3.
That's
Okay.
a good point.
You can tell when you're excited about something.
Do we have other business after this?
No, it's just a commissioner's comments, but I just want to make sure, 'cause it's 10 till now, that,
I'm fine with continuing this discussion as long as we adjourn at 8.
As long as you can finish it really fast.
That's right.
okay. So with that being said, that we will not have an opportunity to have commissioners' comments as long as everybody
That's
is
fine.
okay with that. We won't worry about it. We'll work right up until I just cut him off.
There you go.
And we all leave.
Everyone
I've got
runs out
less
the door.
input on
Okay.
most of the explanation stuff we've already been through anyway. So
Okay.
the operations section's pretty cut and dry. That's one of those where it's got some more of the operational stuff that I can see coming out and going into an operations manual. But at the same time, I think it's important for the pilot project to be readily visible and looked at for the fact that we're going to be careful and cover our bases and be safe and whatnot. That takes us to the prohibited use, which again is going to be, is pretty simple, cut and dry.
One, two, zero, 8.2, very important.
Its own section and bold. And I bolded it because it made its own section title, even though there's nothing more to be said, but that's certainly one that folks are concerned about. The certification, so just requiring that each member of the team gets their certification, and to clarify that that's going to be on the city's dime, of course. And then the team configuration, and that's specific to the pilot program, and then some additional tasks that the team is going to have in order to implement the program. It's important to me that this is its own team, and it isn't piggybacked onto something else, because for the long-term health of the team, That these are people that have a dedicated interest in this, and a sergeant that has a dedicated interest in this, so that they're up on the latest for technologies and case law and all of that, that it needs to have its own entity. But then it's pulls in, has members that are associated with other teams, so you have the specific knowledge. You have somebody on the team that can train everybody else on what the considerations for bomb stuff are and the photography for the MCI scene and whatnot. So it's a unique configuration, which is why it's in here.
And for clarification, this doesn't mean this is the only assignment. This will be a collateral assignment. They'll be trained for that, and they will assemble when it need, like a swap or swap.
So
Yeah,
you don't think that the person needs to be a lieutenant, he could be a sergeant to be in charge of this program?
Oh, I don't know, I think we should discuss that.
Every team has a sergeant. There will also be a lieutenant, certainly.
You're just stirring stuff up there.
I wanted to clarify that a little bit.
120810, there's a little clarification there. Again, one of the biggest concerns that I've heard over and over is that a helicopter you can hear from a mile away, and a UAS you don't even know when it's in your backyard. And so there's two things that we can do to try to improve that, and that's visibility. And I've joked if you could just put a big glowing orb on the top of it so it's clear. I do think that it's possible to affix additional LED, downward-facing LED lighting, red and blue, and stickers and markings on it so that people are more likely to be able to see it and that we're not hiding it from anybody. Granted, down the road, there could be some circumstances with a warrant where we don't want it to be seen, and it's not, that under some circumstances for a full-fledged program that we wouldn't activate it, but for the majority of what we're doing, that we are doing everything that we can to make them visible, to make it visible.
I would just note that in this section, it only says they have to be marked and have or be equipped with the lighting, but it doesn't say the lighting has to be activated or used.
See, in my brain, I assumed that.
Well-
Yes.
I'm not gonna put it on if I don't.
I know, I was just thinking about that though,
Yeah.
is, if you were trying to get sneaky with it. for
Generally
some
in
reason.
FAA regs, if you put a light on it, you
It
gotta
better
use
work.
the light.
I'm aware, but
Yeah, I get
if
that.
I were a
That could be-
union rep for someone getting in trouble for not following the policy, it doesn't say it has to be lit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Operational reporting, each mission will be documented with an after-action report, detail all pertinent information, case number, location, details, training, equipment needs, lessons learned, and any other relevant information. And that'll be a form that we'll need to develop to make it quick and simple and easy, but also include things such as the reason for the usage, which would cover us on the section B from earlier. Data recording is an interesting one. So I'll be curious to see if anybody has any thoughts on that.
Did you model this on the other policies as well?
There's a lot of different things out there, and I kind of morphed it from.
I'm sorry, the EPD, the CCTV and the body worn camera?
No, because they're different in the way that they're implemented. Body cameras, you basically step out of your car and you turn it on, just about. Because of the privacy concerns, I don't think we want these recording every minute of every time that it's flying and capturing every person in their backyard while we go over someplace to get to where we're working. And so, because we're not capturing us or the interaction, I don't think we want to be recording every last thing. And so it is a little bit different, and that's why it's specific to evidentiary or liability, basically, in order to be transparent and collect the evidence, but that we're not running around just taking pictures and recording everything that we see.
Is there a way to know when that machine is operating? And the reason I asked that question, because I could see somebody saying, well, the officers had it flying over me, watching me in my backyard, and then you go, well, there's no video that shows they were ever over your backyard.
That's possible.
But is there like a counter that says this was turned on at this time and was flown for 20 minutes?
Well, each flight, yeah, there's a flight record of each flight that's maintained, and it shows a map of exactly where it was flying. How that would work, I haven't extracted that to how you could print out a log of that or something. I'm sure there's got to be ways to do it.
So I think it would be important so that if that complaint came in, they could pull the drone and say, well, okay, well, was it turned on when they said that it was over their backyard?
And I don't know exactly how detailed of information we can get especially at the recreational type, which is gonna be the price range and capabilities of likely of what we're gonna begin with.
But think about that, because
Yeah.
because that could be
Yeah.
both good, to say they were there, or to say, or they weren't.
Well, those flight records could very easily be attached to the after action, and I would say that's a pertinent detail. If we have access to creating that record, would not be a terrible thing to have, that shows the map, what the flight pattern was, duration of the flight, and that's all stored within the flight program, so. And then the training, videos for training can only be retained if the only identifiable people are city employees. So that way, if there is footage, it can be retained solely for training purposes. We don't want the public being in those videos. And one other agency said it was only if sheriff's office employees are identifiable, but because there's a pretty good potential for working with other city agencies on projects, that it seemed reasonable to open that up to city employees for us. And then just pointing back to all of our already established evidence handling procedures. We do not need to recreate the wheel with this. It's a camera. We operate a lot of cameras here when it comes to the evidence handling portion. And then the reporting back, report to the chief of police, the police commission, for recommendations on moving forward. 7:59.
Okay. Any other questions for this evening? Then I think the plan would be to bring this back for next month.
Yeah, let everybody digest what we've got here, and then bring it back.
Next month, if everybody's comfortable with the policy as written, if we could entertain whether we want to go forward with it at that point in time.
Perfect.
Okay. With that, thank everyone for tonight. Good conversations, and I will see you next month.
Thank you, Chair. So is there a formal way you want